Strap yourselves in. You're listening to the Powell Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week my guest is Scot Chrisman. And Scot is a skier who fell short of his pro ski dreams, and his life has gone in a different direction that includes a podcast that has come out of nowhere to top the charts on iTunes. To be honest, Scot has a podcast that's similar to mine, and I wanted to find out who the hell he was. What I found was that his backstory includes drugs, alcohol, and arrests. And now that Scot has his life back on track, there's a whole lot going on that we're going to talk about. Before we talk to Scot, I need to thank Ryan McBride over at K2 Sports for sending me some heated boots. Heated boots are a game changer, and I don't think I'll ever ski without them again. I highly recommend anyone looking for new boots, make sure there's integrated heat. I also want to thank Kelly over at Stevens Pass for hooking me up with tickets this weekend. It was so much fun, and I want to thank you for listening. I also want to ask you to please follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement. Share my posts on Facebook, which no one seems to want to do, but please do it. It does help the show grow. If you want to connect with me, my email is mike@thepowellmovement.com, and I'd love to hear from you. Finally, I want to thank my sponsors who really make this show happen. They're Evo, Rescue Water, the 10 Barrel Brewery, and Unofficial Networks. Now, let's talk to Scot Chrisman. It seems like you're coming off a big injury. I looked on the internet, and you had posted something about a terrible injury to your leg, and I really didn't get the details, and I guess now's the time. What's going on with your health?
So, on March 37th, I just switched over my headphones. Is it all right?
Yeah, it's okay. And I don't think there's 37 days in March.
Sorry, 27. The last 5 years in a row, I have had a season-ending injury, either February 28th or 27th or March 27th or 28th.
Weird.
Very weird. 5 seasons in a row. It's been like eerie at this point and taken a lot of big things from it, but this latest one was pretty stupid. I was doing a switch 270 onto a box. It was like a disaster. It was pretty slushy. It's been warm in Crested Butte, and we've had a lot of people that just were hitting the sides of the lips and the lips as jumps, but not actually using the rails for anything.
Okay.
The lip got worn down a little bit. It was soft. I was a little bit tired. Went to jump on, and the slush kind of broke through on the lip, and I made it 180 degrees and slammed right on my left shin, right on the corner of the box, and ended up fracturing my tibia, getting a massive laceration. I was bleeding pretty bad. We could see the bone. It was gnarly.
Like 100 stitches and you're good to go?
Dude, I thought it was going to be 100. It was 3. And the doctor did a really amazing job. The way that he anchored the stitches, he was able to really pull it back together. And he wanted to have a little bit more space for anything that needed to come out basically, because it was bigger than a golf ball size, like hole in my leg. It was just an impact cut, so it didn't rip my pants and it didn't rip my long underwear, so it was a pretty clean cut in general. But just in case there's anything in there that needed to come out, it was only 3 stitches. Recovery is about 6 to 8 weeks, so I'll be back. I might end up skiing mid-May. I'm definitely launching in this whole new direction right now, using everything that I've learned in the ski world and personal branding, and then my entrepreneurial journey to branch off and help athletes become entrepreneurs and use their self-branding and marketing techniques that they've already used in the sports industry to create businesses for themselves. So that's kind of the new direction after this injury. After 5 years in a row, it's like, man, I will never push away or put down any opportunity that comes on my plate, but I think I need to take it as a sign and go out and make a different impact.
Next year, I don't think you should ski the 27th and 28th of February. Don't do that in March, and I think you're good to go.
Probably.
You're working on some things with athletes. You're also working on some things with yourself. And you are a digital entrepreneur or a digital cowboy in this new world. And there's a lot of things that you're working on that we're going to talk about later. But I want to talk about your life. And for me, it was hard to find a ton about you online. And I called some people and still not able to find exactly Where were you born and raised?
That's pretty funny. Elusive. Boulder Community Hospital in Boulder, Colorado on April 7th, 1990. I was pretty much raised in Boulder. I went to private schools almost my whole life because I was
Rich?
skiing, always skiing. I was lucky. My parents, going to a private school, obviously have a little bit of money, but it was also, I did not do well in public schools. I was the kind of kid that was kind of like any skier, always getting in trouble, always distracted, always high energy, always just the shithead.
Class clown would define you, maybe?
Class clown, but like not really that funny, just kind of a dick.
Okay.
Like high energy, know-it-all dick would be the real young version of me. And then I actually ended up getting kicked out of a private school in 6th grade.
What do you do to get kicked out of a private school?
There was a lot of emotional build-up to the whole situation, but there was an incident with another kid. I had stitches. I was obviously always out there doing crazy stuff, and I had stitches. I was on the team and gym for basketball, and they weren't passing to me, so I kind of just like gave up. I wasn't really stoked on it. I kind of put my head down and was just like not really in it anymore. And one of the kids goes, "Scott, catch," and throws it and hits me right in my stitches. Boom. And it just lit me up because I did not stand up for myself well. I was just like allowed myself to be a victim, and it all kind of let loose. And I ran at him, and we got in a fight, a tussle, and yeah. So that's how I got kicked out of that school. But I've been talking about this a lot lately, how perceivably bad things in the short term are often the best things in the long term. And so like that took me to different private school that allowed me a lot more freedom and allowed me to ski more. And then from there, I went to Romark Ski Academy, which is out in Salt Lake City. And yeah, I skied for Eldora Mountain Ski Club, which is a pretty small ski club and not like super well known. And when I was like 12 and 13, I was ranked in the top 3 in my age for GS and slalom. And it kind of put Eldora more on the map. One of my big rivals, I would say, Will Gregorak, who ended up making the US ski team, moved over. And it was a pretty cool situation to have Eldora grow, to have more support there. That's where I really cut my teeth in skiing and the outdoor sports in general, is Eldora Mountain Ski Club and Eldora Mountain.
So when you came into skiing, it was all about racing?
Yeah, I started skiing when I was 2 and then started racing when I was like 5.
Okay. And growing up in those like formative race years, I mean, are you fully invested in the ski scene? And when I say that, are you more seeing what's going on in the race world, or are you seeing what's going on in the free ride world? Because at the time that you're coming up, it's such a game-changing time for skiing. You're 8 years old when the new Canadian Air Force is doing their thing. And then just a couple years later, when you get into your teens, it's really when everything's blowing up. Are you 100% a race guy, worried about shaving time off, or are you doing everything?
I am not really concerned about racing. It just happens that when I show up and train, I'm doing well. And when I show up and race, I do well. But my first race, I think I was like 6 or 7, and we show up, and I had never seen gates that had 2 gates where you had to break the plane of the gates. Right. I'd only seen the one gate where you're like, you have to go around it. And I'm like, I don't know where to go. Like, I've never experienced this before. And then the next year I was like 8, but I was competing with people that were my age and a year older and 2 years older. And I ended up winning it. But I was always inspired by seeing the segment with Tanner Hall with the rail on the cornice in, I'm drawing a blank what movie it is right now.
Is it Pop Your Bottles?
Totally. Pop Your Bottles. That was totally it. It was funny because I was so young. I wasn't super young at that point, but, still young and like seeing that party lifestyle, but seeing how hard they were crushing it and seeing video of Whistler, that was what I was inspired by. And looking back, I wish that I would have realized how inspired I was by it earlier, because racing was awesome, but it wasn't necessarily 100% what I deep down in my heart wanted to be doing. I had a pair of skis that I turned into twin tips maybe at like age 9, and I had my grandpa, after watching a movie, I had my grandpa pushing me off this snow pile onto, it was like this little pump track to grind an electrical box. And I'm, like 8 years old, like, I don't know, 4 feet tall or whatever, grinding this 2 feet electric box with these pair of twin tips that I took a waxing iron and held it to the tail until it was warm enough to bend it, and bent it up. And that was how I made twin tips. Those broke pretty quickly. I was very much into the freestyle, but I was good at racing, and I kept being told that I was good at racing by coaches, and like my times and the results kept saying that I was good. And I think I got caught up in the idea of being good instead of following my passion.
Life's fun when you're good.
Yeah, it's fun. People are like, wow, you're doing good. They look up to you because of some odd reason. You're like, oh, especially at that age, like you really have no idea why people are like drawn to you.
And it helps build self-confidence in a positive way. Instead of you just being a jackass in school, you can build self-confidence by actually winning things.
Exactly. And I had this alternate reality that I could go to, because like in school, no one really knew what ski racing was. And they didn't really know like that I was racing against a bunch of people, or like they knew what soccer was, and they knew like, I scored a goal in soccer, or I scored a touchdown in football, but they didn't know what like I beat someone by 0.6 of a second in GS was. So like I still was alienated in that front, but I had something that I could always turn inward and be like, hey, people think I'm good at something, or like there are people that value me in the world. So skiing became that thing that I was always thinking about.
You're doing great in ski racing, but at the same point, when you're 13, you have some huge moments in your life that I'm sure still impact you today. And you're going to have to fill in the details because, like I said, there's not a ton out there for me to find. But I know you had a friend, I think it was a female friend of yours, someone that you had a kindred spirit with, or you thought there was a real connection. And then she passes away, and I don't know if you're there, but crazy shit for a 13-year-old, and fill me in on the details.
Yeah, definitely. So we were at a ski race at Vail. We were on the training run where they hold the U.S. Opens now, like where you see the half pipe and the slopestyle happen.
Okay.
For U.S. Open at Vail. That used to be where we would train and race slalom and GS as J3s. And this amazing woman that I had crossed paths with a couple times, named Ashley Stamp, we had met probably the year before at a ski race, and she had done decently, and she was really, really humble about it. And I could see that she was doing the opposite, like not valuing at all what doing good was doing for her in this like humble way, that she was self-confident. And I was really drawn to it, and it was very like pure, authentic energy. And I would see her around, and we would talk briefly. At that point, I was awful with girls, so there wasn't much of a way. Like I just wasn't good at communicating my.
You're 13, man. I don't think any 13-year-old's good with girls.
Exactly. So like we're forming whatever kind of friendly relationship happens in that, and I want to tell her that I like her. And we end up at an Olympic training center camp together. And that camp was awesome. It was 30 of us split in the J3 age, which was 2 years, 89 and 90, I think that year. So like we had hung out a little bit, talked a little bit. I was still super nervous about even talking to her at that point. I like was trying to convince myself before leaving that camp to run up to her and just be like, hey, like, I like you. You're really cool. I'd love to keep in touch. And I wasn't able to do it. And this is like one of the biggest regrets I think I might have in my life. Not regrets, but like learning lessons. And one of the places that I've anchored a bad feeling so that I don't do that again. But I didn't. I just kind of let it go. See, that was probably August or September. And, when you're 13, you have like obsessive crushes where you're like, you just think about that one person a lot.
You create a lot of mental pictures.
Exactly. And that was that one person that I was like thinking about. And I was like, so totally at this race in Vail, it's the first race of the year. I'm totally going to go up to her. I'm going to say something to her. I'm stoked about it. Like this is my chance. And I'm also trying to focus on the race, and we're taking a warm up run, and I see her kind of close, and I think she was like under the chairlift. Anyways, we ski down to the training course, and I like see her skiing away, and she doesn't do the training course. She's like to the side of it, and a snowmobile is coming up and jumps the start and collides with her.
And you see this?
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
And that whole day, there's not much of solid memories just because of, I don't know, it was so hard. It was so hard. We ended up skiing a little bit later that day because we knew that if there was anything that she would want, that would be for us to like go out and ski and try and like celebrate skiing in some way, and like tried to do that. Went home, and I was solid depressed for a long time. Long time. That was a super life-changing moment for me. It formed a lot of insecurities revolving around female relationships, and I know you've talked to like Spriggs about anger and stuff like that, and you know, I had an experience where I got in trouble with the law because of anger, and I think a lot of it I could almost pinpoint back to not being able to process the grief that happened through that experience, and I've been doing a lot more work since then on it. But yeah, it's hard, and especially in this sport, we see it so prevalently. We lose friends left and right. It's been a hard 15 years since that.
That's some crazy shit for a 13-year-old to experience, because you don't even know how to handle those emotions. And when you see that, I don't even know what that does to you. But I do know that, like you said, you're depressed. And that's not all that happens to you, because you're at Mount Hood for the summer. So I don't know if it's your first time at Hood, but you're the first one onto the scene of someone who double ejects into rocks. And at 13, you see 2 people die. And that's just insane to me, because someone might have a grandparent die or something like that at 13. But to see 2 peers die has to really impact you a lot. And was that summer just as tough?
Definitely. The way that I can put it is every time you experience loss, it's different. And every single individual that has departed this reality or whatever, that's moved on, has affected me differently. And some of that has been like my emotional coping at the time, but the Mount Hood one was very different. So with Ashley, I had a lot of regret. And then, you know, eventually learned how to say, okay, like I'm going to speak my voice and I'm not going to let that happen. And I'm going to be adamant about that. And I forget his name. I didn't know him personally, had never met him before. That was really difficult for me because I felt really helpless and powerless in the situation. Because like I ski down, I tell the ski patrol, well, I ski up, and I see him, and like his face is just not in good condition, and he's not in good condition. The coach skis up like immediately behind, and then my coach skis up as well, and his coach says like, go tell ski patrol. So we take off, we go down to the bottom of Palmer lift at Mount Hood, because this was below midway on Palmer. And we tell this lifty that like there's serious accident, ski patrol needs to get there immediately, like things need to move now. And he's like, yeah, like we heard about it, we're on it. And I rode the chairlift up, got to the top, and there's the ski patrol shack up top, and I tell them, I'm like, you guys need to get the fuck on helping this kid. Something is not okay. Because I rode the lift up and I see that no one has gotten to him.
Damn.
And then they brought in a flight for life. There was some weather. I think the previous summer, the helicopter had gone down on the other side of Hood with the rescue. So there was like a lot of high tension, high stress, high calculated risk situations. They tried to pick him up in one area and they couldn't. So they moved him to another area and they picked him up there. And then, we found out later that he had passed away, but we're literally sitting on the glacier just watching all of this because as they bring the helicopter in, no one can go below Palmer. So that one was just completely different in like trying to watch the universe or the world like orchestrate and come together in a way. And it felt like it should have, and it didn't. I would say they both were like very traumatic in the idea of losing some faith or trust.
I guess you look at it as skiing and there's danger to it, but at 13 years old, you don't think the danger is going to kill you. You think you're going to break an arm and the worst thing that can happen is you get paralyzed. But I don't think you think about death at that age because you can't die when you're 13. You just can't get hurt.
Totally. My biggest thought was always about being in a wheelchair. My dad's in a wheelchair. My dad has MS. That was what I thought about if I thought about getting super injured on. MS is not an injury, but, being in a wheelchair is what I thought about when I was thinking about that, not death. And it definitely, I don't think I ever blamed it on skiing. I was able to remove myself from the situations enough to say like, hey, well, I know not to ski close to the rocks in any spring condition because they're going to heat up the snow around it and it's going to make it slushier, and then there's a chance you're going to hit the rocks, So I mindfully make sure anytime I'm skiing in spring corn slush conditions that I'm making sure where the chocolate chips are and I don't go within, like 10, 15 feet of them. So I was able to tactically remove myself, and I never attributed it to skiing necessarily. It's not like I put this blanket statement like skiing can kill you. It's just like mistakes can kill you.
Yep.
I kept pursuing skiing. There were a couple times after it that I really would question waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go do speed training at Eldora at sunrise. That's on my Saturday.
Yeah, but you still had a chance. When you look at the race world, if you get to that echelon where the coaches are telling you have a chance and you really believe that there's a chance you're going to make the U.S. team, then it's worth it to wake up at 5 in the morning. If you're on the bubble, it's worth it because you might make it. You should know at 13 if there's a chance for you to even head towards the U.S. team because they kind of earmark people at a young age. It's not like you're turning 23 and then you're making the team. I don't think that happens very often. So if you still believe and you're still going to invest that time because there's a chance, yeah, then you've got a dream and you're going to follow it. But if that dream's not there, and that does happen for some people, it is a waste of time and money at some point.
Yeah, definitely.
But you were close.
I was close, and I was always being told that. I was always being given opportunities. I was sponsored at the age of 12, and there was always incentive to continue, and I definitely, I don't regret anything, any part of my path, because where I'm at now, I wouldn't trade for anything, and I sure as hell wouldn't be here if I didn't go down the exact path that I went down.
Yeah, it's interesting how the choices we make earlier in life lead us to where we are today. And where I am right now is taking a break for my sponsors. And my first sponsor is Evo. And if you haven't shopped at Evo or been to one of their stores in Denver, Seattle, or Portland, you are missing out on the best retail and online experience in the country. In store, Evo creates an experience like no other. The staff knows the product and they're easy to talk to. And they're people who want to help you find the right gear for your adventure. If you can't make it to a store, Evo.com has all the brands, all the products, and a low price guarantee, free shipping on orders of $50 or more, and a no-hassle return policy. For listening to the Powell Movement, they're going to give you an additional 10% off when you check out. You're going to want to use the code capital TPM, the number 10, all one word, and you will get 10% off your entire order. My next sponsor is Rescue Water. There's no drink out there that's going to hydrate you better than a Rescue Water. It's science and it works. Think of it like this. When you wake up, you drink a cup of coffee, but if you really need energy, you grab yourself an energy drink. With Rescue Water, it's a similar principle. When you need to hydrate, like when you finish your workout, leave the skate park, or get done practice, skip the sports drink and drink a cold Rescue Water. It's a difference that you will feel. I drink a cold one before bed after big nights, and there's no more Saturday morning headaches. It's amazing how well it works for me, and you can make it work for you by heading over to rescuewater.com. And if you want to save 20% on a 12-pack case, enter the code RESQ Water TPM. That's all one word when you check out, and you'll get 20% off a 12-pack case. Rescue Water is also available on Amazon and Amazon Prime. My final sponsor brews beer, drinks beer, and has fun doing it, period. They're the 10 Barrel Brewery based out of Bend, Oregon. They live and breathe the ski and snowboard culture, and in the summer, they bike, they hike, but most importantly, they like to drink beer outside. They want you to embrace your inner 10 Barrel and start drinking beer outside as well. If that's not your thing, maybe food is, and if you happen to be in Bend, Portland, Boise, Denver, or San Diego, check out one of the 10 Barrel pubs for some great food and our favorite beers. Find out more about the beer, their events, and their pubs over at 10barrel.com. Those are my sponsors, so we will get back into it with you. And you end up going to Romark Ski Academy. You do that with the intention of, hey, I'm going to make the U.S. ski team, I'm going to be an Olympian, and it's going to be fucking amazing. And that's the dream, right?
Yep.
How long does it take before you realize that, hey, I might not make the U.S. ski team?
There were some doubts even the year before. I trained with the U.S. ski team coach in Austria when I was 15 in Pitstall with the Slovenian Europa Cup team,
Okay.
which is like one off the World Cup team. And I struggled to put on muscle mass for a long time. I finally, the most I've ever weighed was 180 pounds, 2 months ago before my injury. I was always super small and lanky, and I was out there and we were doing some dry land stuff, and I got my ass handed to me in dry land with some of these guys. And it was that contrast that I realized that was probably the beginning of it. I was like, oh wow, I don't know if I can be that strong. And it was probably that mindset that didn't allow me to be that way. But then I moved out to Romark, and I still continued to pursue it, and I still wanted it, but I weighed between 120 and 130 pounds when I graduated high school. There was a point in my senior year when I weighed 115 pounds.
You don't have the weight behind you.
Exactly. You can have all the technique in the world. You can be the sickest skier in the world. If you don't have that weight, then,
You need to ski with weights in your pockets. It was like when Sean Pettit was little. We used to tell him it all the time, man. When he skied pipe, it was like, dude, if we put 5-pound weights in your pockets, you might be able to get out of the pipe a little bit higher.
Right? You might get some amplitude. That's hilarious. When I was at Romark, I specifically remember a event that we did that was a ski swap or a gear swap every year, and it was a fundraiser for us. So the kids worked it. And I ended up in the office for whatever reason.
Were you a punk kid? I just hear you end up in the office, and just curious.
I was definitely a punk, but it wasn't necessarily in visual representation. If you looked at me, I was just your normal average kid, but I had a fucking attitude.
Okay.
For sure. And intelligence. I've just always been able to put together situations pretty quickly, and when I was young, I would take that and attach ego to it. I was just a shithead. But I ended up in the office. I don't know why. That's just where I wanted to be. I didn't want to be out on the floor helping people get ski gear. I had found the ski gear that I wanted, and there was one person that needed to be in the office. I ended up being that person. How I finagled that, I don't know. And I was watching ski porn and watching everyone just crush it in ski porn, and realizing I had taken a break from ski movies at that point, from maybe 2013, 14, 15-ish. It's not that I had taken a break. I had seen Warren Miller's and stuff like that, but I hadn't seen what was going on in MSP and stuff like that.
Yep.
And then I got TGR's Anomaly. I think I finally got a hard copy of Pop Your Bottles and a couple other DVDs. But I was watching ski porn, and I was that was another turning point in realizing hey, actually, I think that's what I want to do. And it was funny because at that ski swap, I bought a baggy pair of white pants that had these. That's when I started to go more punk in aesthetics.
Okay.
I got these white pair of pants. You know, as a ski racer, you need zip offs so that way you can strip down to your speed suit on race day, right? So I was the kid on race day that had these baggy ass white pants with like bugs and spiders on them that I would have to pull over my boots to get off instead of zipping them down because they didn't have zippers because they were actually, you know, true free ride pants.
They were what everybody was wearing.
Exactly. And I was the only ski racer out there like rocking this swag, and I'd wear like a bandana.
So you were trying to make ski racing cool.
Exactly. Very much so. I'd wear my bib as if it was a bandana like hanging down behind me and stuff. And that was kind of the start of the transition. And then in high school, that's just where I went from acting like a punk to being a fucking punk. And I ended up exploring the drug world, and that just took me, my whole senior year took me off of my path. I won the Laura Flood Memorial up in Sun Valley my senior year, which was awesome because that was against some people who went on and did really well in the ski racing world. So that was kind of my last little claim to fame. And I finally had come back to a point where I didn't care about ski racing, and I did well again, which is funny because it started out where I didn't care and I was just out there having fun, and I crushed it. And then it kind of trended towards doing well, but valuing doing well. And then I was kind of at a point, I don't know if there was some juice taken out of me with the Ashley and Mount Hood experience, but then like 14, 15, it started to become more this thing that I needed to have instead of just like not caring and it being cool. And then I attached myself more and more, and and then it seemed to kind of like get pushed away from me. And then 18 rolled around and I was like, I'm done. Can't do that anymore. I don't know if I'm even going to ski anymore. And then
I'm going to jump back in a little bit. And before I talk about drugs, and I always like talking about them, but I want to get one more question in about racing, because there is one story that I hope you know about and maybe can fill in some background. There was a ski racer back in the day, and I should have Googled his name. He was on an airplane flying, because you guys, when you're young and coming up, you're on all these international trips trying to vie for position and get better in the ski race world. And one of these guys was served on a plane at about 17 years old and got pretty drunk. And then he pissed on a girl. Do you remember that?
Oh my. I remember the story, but I don't remember who it was.
I was hoping you knew him. Yeah, I can't remember who it was either. The story was he was overserved. He stood up. He urinated on someone on a plane whose dad happened to be like on the row across. I don't know if that ended his ski career, but it probably did.
Dude, probably.
Yeah. I mean, that's just something you can't do. I mean, peeing on other people is never looked at as cool. I like your silence there. Like,
I'm trying to look it up who it is. I'm trying to figure this out. Sandy Veets.
Yep.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I mean, okay, so we'll just let it fly. I got really drunk one time on a bus in Chile with 40 other athletes, including Chapo Diaz and Ian McIntosh.
Chopo's one that people don't know that well in the U.S., but he is an absolute legend in the Farallones area.
Yeah, Chapo does not get enough press in the ski world in general. He is a badass guy, very humble, loves the mountains. His sister Soleil is a super bright light as well. They've both done well on what used to be the Free Skiing World Tour. They were more in that era. So we were with those guys, and the North Face provided us with like 12 bottles of Pisco and 6 24 flats of Saludo, I think was the beer that we had. Needless to say, there were 40 athletes that weren't sure that there was going to be alcohol on the bus, so we brought pretty much the same amount or more with us. This is a 13-hour bus ride, and group blackout. Multiple people ended up peeing on the bus, one of them being me. People puked all over it. There were times where like 3 people were in the bathroom puking at the same time, 2 people out the window, 1 person in the toilet. That is probably by far the most fucked up I've ever been in my life. Yeah. So speaking of those terrible experiences, but
It's a great story, but I will separate that as you're with buddies getting hammered. You're not solo peeing on a girl on a plane, and I'm glad you didn't do that.
I'm not making excuses. It brought me back to that moment, and I think it's pretty funny.
And that was a great time in your life where you'll look back on that, and those pees publicly are probably looked at fondly. Sandy, not looking at his public urination very fondly. His parents probably aren't either, and every single person that ever met him looks at him when they see him like, man, you really pissed on a girl on a plane?
Right? That was you?
Your career was looking so promising until you urinated on that person on the plane.
That's actually how Ian McIntosh and I forged a pretty awesome relationship because he gave me shit about it the whole week.
You peed on each other. Weird.
It was dark. I don't really know.
Yeah, whatever floats your boat, man. Ian's a great guy, and if you want to get closer to him, peeing on him might be the way to do it.
Pro tip. Want to make friends with your pros, pee on them.
Seriously, pro tip. Talking about being fucked up, though, so you say you got into drugs, in like late high school years, but what kind of drugs are we talking about? Are you smoking weed every day and just constantly high, or are you taking it to another level?
Definitely took it to another level. I smoked weed for the first time Thanksgiving of my senior year. I guess that would have been 2007. And then a month later, I was smoking weed every day. And then about 2 weeks later, I was doing pain pills or pharmaceuticals almost every day.
Dang.
And yeah, it was a pretty I had so much attachment to ski racing and had dreamt so big about it and lost my identity when I started to realize. I think that was the big moment, was senior year. I wasn't getting bigger and I didn't walk into senior year as strong as I wanted to be. And that was kind of the big moment of ski racing probably isn't going to happen anymore. And then I really started to turn towards trying to have the experiences that I thought I missed out on in high school. So part of those were partying and socialization. I went down that route, and I also, in the socialization, I met a girl who went to a different school who also worked for a pharmacy. And she could pop a pill in her purse, and she was filling a prescription. And so I literally, anytime I wanted, could just, I want an Oxy, or I want a Ritalin, or whatever it was.
What was your favorite?
I definitely was all about Oxys. Loved pain pills, for sure. That was probably that was what took me down the hardest. The thing that I couldn't control. And it got to a point where it altered my brain chemistry so quick that by the time it had fucked me up, it was so quick, and I almost didn't even realize it. Almost didn't even have the perspective to realize how dependent I was on it.
And how are you funding all this? I mean, I guess you're getting it from the pharmacy.
Exactly. It was free, and then I was selling a little bit of weed on the side for some extra cash.
Your parents get wind of it at all?
They know about it now.
But back then they didn't know?
They figured something was up, but I was pretty good at smoke and mirrors. So a lot of it was because I was so supported by my parents. I felt really guilty about what I was doing, but it wasn't enough to stop me, obviously.
You can always justify doing it because of the feeling.
Yeah. Yep, definitely. And they knew something was up. My mom was still living in Colorado because since my dad has MS, he was medically retired by the time I was 12. And he was able to travel with me and help me out. My parents were still together, but he was out in Salt Lake with me. And he was at that point focusing on his personal health a lot, eating a ton of raw food, going to Pilates, seeing a bunch of people that seemed to be helping him. I wanted him to stay on that path. He was caught up in his own life, and I wasn't going to throw any red flags up to say that there was anything wrong with mine. There was a lot. If my mom was there, she would have caught it in about 2 days and been like, what the fuck are you doing? My dad was so caught up with what he had going on that I didn't let him see it.
You read about it all the time. We have an opioid crisis, and it sounds like a lot of pain pills are how people are getting into that, and you have access to them. And how do you pull yourself out of that spiral, and how long does it last?
So it lasted probably about 4 months.
That's not that bad.
It's not that bad. I'm super lucky that that's all that happened. And that's not all that happened in the drug world, but that's all that happened in regards to pain pills. It came to a point where my brain chemistry was so messed up at that point. I would sleep for like 14 hours at a time. It was just to a point where I was not a functioning human being. I went from a highly functional, like, star athlete to just like complete
Degenerate.
And I wasn't happy. I didn't know how to get happy. I wasn't sure what was going on in my life or the direction that I was going. But my girlfriend at the time lived in Utah, and I moved back to Colorado. And when I had to start funding, that habit became a lot harder.
Yeah, I can imagine.
That definitely contributed to it. I was isolating myself from my friends because it just wasn't fun to be around. Because I was just numbing myself to the point where it just wasn't. It wasn't fun to be around. And there were a couple instances that led me to not doing it anymore. But one of them was taking acid for the first time.
You didn't have a good experience?
I took way too much.
How much is way too much?
14 hits.
That's way too much, man. You should never take 14 hits.
No one should ever take 14 hits. All I can tell you is that my consciousness was struggling to handle it all.
It's so much.
So much. I also tried coke for the first time that night. And that just like the whole combination of everything, that was awful. And then I had like this realization that night that I was like, oh, wow, this is not a good direction. And I still struggled around in the deep end for a while, drowning, but started to make my way towards the easier path in life after that. And I had an experience in Salt Lake City when I overdosed on ecstasy.
What happens when you overdose on ecstasy?
Hallucinations, very, very irregular heartbeat, from beating 160 beats a minute to 50 in a matter of like 10 seconds. It would make that transition and then like speed back up.
So how long are you a party kid? The pills sounded like 4 months, but are you partying for a couple years?
It's basically a solid year.
Okay.
And I hit that year so hard that I can't hit it anymore.
Okay. And so do you do anything these days at all, or is it weed and beer and that's kind of life?
I don't drink. I haven't drank for a year and a half. Alcohol and sugar are two things that really affect my emotional stability.
Huh.
So I stay away from those, and I like really tailor my nutrition. I have daily meditation. I work out all the time. So these days it's all about health and peace of mind and creating an impact in the world through like owning the piece that I get to, which is me.
Yeah.
That's kind of the direction. But I would say like I did drink pretty heavily for a while up until a year and a half ago. And that's something that I'm pretty passionate about these days, is trying to help out with the paradigm of the ski town alcoholic. And like we all love après and we all love that camaraderie and joining together in celebration of the day and like in revelment of what's happened throughout the day, and telling our stories and sharing that with each other is amazing. And I think that alcohol has maybe become too much of a cornerstone in après. And I'm not trying to say that it's a bad thing, but I definitely think that we need just overall in the world, we need more community and connection. And sometimes alcohol can create false community and false connection because you don't remember that feeling doesn't last past the night sometimes.
I love the après vibe, but I also see if someone's predisposed to alcoholism, you can tell with friends, the ones that really love drinking and they're not stopping at 2 a.m., they're going to keep going. And over time, I believe that turns into a problem more so, where for me personally, I've always been able to have a few or even have 10 at an après situation and then not have to après the next day. But the people that really love alcohol, if they're not apréing, they're still going to go home and have their 8 drinks. So I feel like while skiing does breed a community of drinking after the day, I think that's great. It's just not for everyone. And if you have alcoholic tendencies, the ski town's the worst place for you because that's what people do.
Definitely. And I just would love to see another option for people because for me, I know myself and I know that like what my predisposition is with obsession and addiction.
Yep.
It's one of the things that's led me to be so good at some of the things that I have done because I can get obsessed pretty easily and I can get addicted to things. So, it can be a beneficial trait, but understanding the powers and like the strengths and weaknesses of that individual trait. So like I would say, a good 80 or 90% of people can drink and are totally fine with it,
Yeah.
Some people get stuck where they feel like they need the bar for socialization because like this is one of the things that happened for me when I quit drinking was I found myself really lonely and not really able to find the connections that I wanted to. And it's hard when you're not drinking to be at the bar when someone catches a little bit of a buzz and then your communication gets off where someone's talking about one thing and you're talking about another thing. And that was really hard for me. For me, I would just love to see another option. It's not that I am condemning or saying that there's anything wrong with Apres, but I would just love to see more just like the celebration of the day being the cornerstone more than alcohol, I guess. So that way it's more inviting for people of all types. Because I smoke weed all the time, man. I smoke a lot of weed. I smoke a lot of concentrates. This is actually what I smoke. But that's my medicine. I have my medical card, and CBDs really help me heal. They've really helped me deal with pain. I don't take pain pills anymore. I did the whole tibia thing. I did ACL surgery. I did my back. I broke my wrist and I cut through a nerve in my finger, all of them without pain pills. And it's all weed and CBD. So that's what works for me, and that doesn't work for other people, and that can make other people become super lazy, or it can affect others differently. There's just no like blanket situation. I just want an outlet for people because there have been a couple suicides lately in Crested Butte, and I definitely do think that alcoholism and that kind of trap can be detrimental towards certain people's situations in mountain towns.
And I think you nailed it. It's a total trap. When you live in those communities, there's not many people that have quote unquote real jobs. So if you're the lifty or if you're tuning skis, your life is go to work, maybe have a split shift, maybe not. After work, you're going to head to the bar, drink with your friends, stay out till 11 to look at the snow report, head home and do it all over again. And for people coming in those towns that are tourists, yeah, they do it too for a week. But that is your life in those ski towns. And really, like you say, there is no other alternative. If you're not at Apres, what are you doing? Because there's really not that much else going on at that time of day.
For me, I just started building businesses, and I love that.
And we're going to talk about that. We've talked a little bit about drugs and alcohol. You were able to get your way out of there. I guess the one thing we didn't talk about, because you mentioned it earlier, was you had an arrest with anger. And whenever someone brings that up earlier, I'm going to bring it up later. What happened there?
Technically, it wasn't even around anger. There were some angry parts around the relationship, and I guess there were some angry text messages that I sent that were kind of involved in the whole situation. But I went over to my ex-girlfriend's house at 2:00 in the morning, drunk, and I just wanted to have closure on the relationship. And it was commonplace in the relationship for her to come over to my place at 2:00 in the morning drunk and ask for help, or 12:00 in the morning and ask to stay there and ask for comfort. And we had broken up. It wasn't the best decision. I went over there and I knocked on the door, and I went in without answering. So that was the big red flag, was that I went in without her answering.
Yep.
I go downstairs because she was normally sleeping on the couch. She wasn't there. I briefly spoke to one of her roommates, went upstairs, talked to her. We go outside, talk for about 2 minutes. I realize immediately that she's not having it, and give her a hug, go back to the guy who's driving and go home. And I bought her a pair of skis, and she stopped talking to me after that, like blocked my number. And so I figured if she was done talking to me that the closure had happened. And so I listed the pair of skis on a marketplace on Facebook. She calls me and says, if you don't give me the skis, I'm calling the cops on you. And I just kind of like laughed at her. I'm like, yeah, for what? Like, that's funny. Like, I went over there and I told you I was sorry and that I loved you and left. And I have a pair of skis that I told you I was going to give you before we broke up, and you're not talking to me anymore. So I list them and just kind of like laugh. And then 2 days later, she calls the cops and sends it just full on anything that the cops wanted to hear, says it. Says that I went in, says that I tried to crawl in bed with her other roommate, says that I picked her up and wouldn't let her down, and writes some pretty nasty stuff in a victim impact statement that are complete lies, and that led me to a felony trespassing charge with a domestic violence kicker.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
That's fucking crazy.
Gnarly, super gnarly. That's been the biggest pivotal moment in my life thus far in the past, 3 years.
Is that what made you quit drinking?
That is definitely what made me quit drinking. I broke my back 6 months before that, or maybe a little bit longer, 7 months before that. And then I lost my best friend a month and a half after breaking my back, Jordan Edrick, who was a speed flyer, an amazing skier. And that led to a lot of anger. I had quit drinking that season before, like when I broke my back, lose my friend, start drinking again, let that anger take hold of me. And that was where like some of the nasty text messages came in, was just lack of support. And I was just angry at the world. I've been through so many things, lost so many friends, and to lose Jordan, I was supposed to go out and speed fly with him. He was supposed to teach me how to speed fly 2 weeks afterwards. And I was pissed at the universe. I felt like it took not only my best friend, but my opportunity to learn how to fly. Yeah, I was angry. I did not make friends with the universe for a long time after that. Not make up with the universe. That kind of led to all that. I didn't even hear that I had a warrant out for my arrest until December, and that was in October. I just decided, I'm like, no more drinking in my life. I'm gonna take every step necessary to make sure that I become the best man that I possibly can be. Because although the situation wasn't fair to me, the universe doesn't lie, and I have some shit that I need to work on. It doesn't matter what the reality of the situation was versus the charges and the punishment. It was in my lap, and I could either get better or get better. So I chose to get better. And it wasn't easy. It was a long time that I dealt with a lot of emotions surrounding shame and guilt and all these, like, felt like I threw away my ski career. I felt like I messed up a lot of areas in my life. And, I did in a lot of ways, but ultimately it gave me an opportunity to see that there were bigger things than skiing and bigger things. And that's led me to where I'm at today.
And I would say it's a perfect segue because this is a business podcast too. I mean, especially with you, because I kind of have two different shows. It's one, I'm going to talk to business people in the action sports world and tell their stories like I would an athlete, but then tie in what they're doing business wise. The others are pure athlete stories. And yours really, to tell you the truth, you popped up on my radar about a month ago. I was on my computer. I looked on iTunes because I look at the rankings every once in a while to see what podcasts are doing what. And I look and I see the number one podcast on iTunes is The Athletic Stance by Scot Chrisman. And it's a ski podcast. And you said something earlier, which was a really good line. You said you could be like bitter or better. So I see that. I'm like, holy shit, this is a similar podcast to what I do. I could have been bitter at first. And for the first hour, sure. I was like, holy shit, this guy came out of nowhere. He's number one on iTunes. What the fuck am I doing? And then I thought about it and I was like, you know what? When I started podcasting, Mark from the Low Pressure podcast, I made sure I reached out to him because I didn't want to step on his toes, and I wanted to let him know, hey, there's space for all these podcasts out there. And I did the same thing with you. I reached out, I said, holy shit, congratulations. I can't believe skiing's #1. We should talk, because I realize we can only help each other in the long run. I'm going to be excited for you. I'm going to put you on my show, and we're going to talk about the strategies. But I realize now we're going to talk about strategies offline. But what we are going to share are all the different business things that you're doing, because really you're a busy dude. And every time I talk to you, it's something else coming up that's a totally different idea that you're running with. And I guess I'll start it with, in terms of becoming an entrepreneur, did you realize, hey, I'm not going to be a professional skier. My dream in life was to be a paid skier and win an Olympic gold medal. That's not going to happen. And I understand that. And now I'm going to branch out and get paid in the ski world more than I could ever get paid as a skier by creating all these properties. Was that kind of your thought process?
It's been kind of a core philosophy. I still had 1 foot in and 1 foot out of being a professional athlete. I was still trained up until even this season, up until I hurt my tibia. I was doing like 2 days. I was training skiing, training in the gym, and then working on business. That was my life this whole winter. Since this last injury, I've like 100% made the decision I'm not pursuing professional skiing at all. But the intent has always been to be able to make money out of the skiing industry, not from companies, because the way that I see it, the landscape is changing a lot right now. What used to be, a very viable way to make a living, and I don't want to say very viable. What used to be a viable way of making a living is now really, really hard. The competition has increased. Everyone out there is pulling doubles and triples. And what I realized is that being your own personal brand and being the athlete that is creating your own following and creating your own content is how you stand out, whether it's with a podcast, whether it's with an edit series, whether it's with Instagram. It's all ways that you get to leverage your name, your personal brand, your voice to create an impact. And it also is a way that brands value you. So it started out for me with trying to master Instagram like 3 years ago.
And you kill it on that, engagement-wise. I think you have like 12,000 followers. Every post you put up gets like 3,000 likes, and it's not like you're promoting these things. So the engagement that you're getting, because that was one of the first things I noticed when I started researching you, is just off the charts. I mean, any brand, if they were to have anything close to what you have, their social media guy would be Employee of the Year. So when you say you got into Instagram, you didn't just get into it, but you were able to really make it work for you.
Yeah, definitely. I've been lucky to run into the right people at the right times. People that are knowledgeable and people who have been able to teach me, because it's not like I went out and studied the algorithm and figured all this out. I just figured out who knew about it.
It's all who you know, right?
Yep, totally. So, yeah, for me, like, I think content is king, and being able to tell your story. And if you look at McCrae Williams' latest video about mindfulness, it's so powerful. And it's storytelling. It uses emotional anchors that have happened in his life. It really allows him to have an impact, to represent brands, and to represent himself all at the same time. And I think that's kind of the ultimate target of what athletes should be trying to hit right now. And I've always loved art. I've always loved the idea of like branding and what that means and logo creation. And I've always been obsessed with the Brain Farm motion graphics and the Red Bull motion graphics. And so as I have invested in myself and invested in the entrepreneurial journey and completely failed with my first company, Academy of Skiing.
That failed?
It's not running right now.
And this was an online platform where people could learn how to ski through tutorials and exercises and workouts that you had?
Yes. It wasn't a failure. I affected more than one person's life. So that in and of itself, definitely not a failure. That's a win. But as far as like making much of a profit at all, not very good. But when the podcast started to take off, I just completely jumped ship on pushing Academy of Skiing and went to the athletic stance. But coming back, it started out as a way for me I wanted to help teach people. I wanted to pass along my expertise in the ski world. And now I've kind of realized that I have a lot more than just like my expertise in the ski world. I have my, the social media and the entrepreneurial and the personal branding and ways for athletes to figure out what they're passionate about and create entrepreneurial ventures out of it and create content out of it. So I have a content creation company. I'm writing a book. I'm starting to get into public speaking, and I'm about to be throwing like a big splash in the water here in the next month and a half. And then hopefully out of my case studies, being able to help other athletes leverage the voice that they already have to create personal brands that can, expand past the ski industry. Because that's a lot of what I'm doing right now is I'm leveraging my experience in the ski industry to say like, hey, check out what I've done here. It's pretty cool. And I can relate it to this bigger niche.
There's so many things going on. I mean, when I look at me, I have a podcast and that's my focus and that's what I'm doing. You have a podcast that's doing it really well. And that's just one of your focuses. So you've got like 10 other things going on. The book, you're a breakthrough accountability coach. I don't even know what that means, but you're one of those. You do speaking engagements, and it's like skiing gave you the background and eventually the confidence to go out and break out and make a living doing what you want to do. But in terms of the podcast itself, because I'm going to guess you're like me and you got into podcasting because you're good at talking and you want to tell some great stories and you can provide great content. But what did you know getting into podcasting? Anything?
So you bring up the breakthrough accountability coach. So I was working for a life coaching company, helping hold high achievers accountable to like their dreams and goals. So I would call them once or twice a week and we'd talk about like what they wanted to accomplish in that week. And then we would set basically a punishment and a pleasure to like, if you accomplish it, you get to take your wife out to your favorite spot for dinner. If you don't accomplish it, you have to pay your worst enemy in the office. You have to spend the money that you would have spent on that dinner and pay your worst enemy in the office, like $250. We were using ways to hold them accountable to what they wanted to accomplish. And that trained me in sales and got me introduced to a guy who, working for that company, he wanted to start a podcast. So he sent me through a podcasting course. And as I'm going through the podcasting course, I'm like, I could probably apply this to my life.
You took a course?
Andrew Farabee's podcasting course. It was free at one point. I think it's $10 now. It might be up to 50. Okay. Andrew Farabee runs a podcast called Knowledge for Men. And I actually hired a life coach after the whole incident with the anger and the felony. And that was an ultimate transition in my life, having someone to like reflect back to me what I was wanting and the actions that I was taking to get there and whether they were in alignment and stuff. So that got me into being coached. And then I made a bunch of massive transitions that 6 months and then got hired as a life coach by another company doing this stuff. He sent me through the podcasting course. And then I actually have had the pleasure of meeting Pat Flynn, if you know who Pat Flynn is,
yep.
And Trevor Chapman, hopefully Tim Ferriss here in the next year. Got some friends that are close to him. So in between that time period of meeting Pat, I met Jordan Harbinger, and who does The Art of Charm, or used to do The Art of Charm. There's a big old stink about he got kicked out of his own company recently. So I met these people and I saw what they were doing with the podcast, and I was like, well, I have all these connections. I went through this course. I have the tools, and I might as well just send it. So I sent a message to Ian McIntosh and Angel Collinson. I was like, those are probably two of the more influential people that I know well that would probably be into it. And I just kind of I was like, I'm going to call it The Athletic Stance, a Skier's Perspective. And it's going to be about interviewing high-level athletes about fitness, nutrition, and routine. And just shot that message off. And both of them said yes. I was like, oh, well, all right. Lexi DuPont just commented on something on Facebook, speaking about engagement and, social media. So Lexi DuPont commented on something on my Facebook, something about food affecting diet. And she's like, yeah, totally. And so I messaged her. I'm like, hey, want to connect for a podcast interview? This is what it's going to be about. And she was my first interview. And then I know you do a lot of research. It's very apparent in what you do with your podcast that you research your guests and that you go out and you spend the time. I went out and I spent the time to research Lexi and crushed that interview so hard that she was stoked and sent an email out to her good friends. She ended up helping me get a lot more guests, and it just kind of like snowballed from there. But this new philosophy that I'm running by is constant imperfect action and just throwing a bunch of shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. And if too many things stick, I can delegate to other people. But I'm not going to have a problem of not enough stuff sticking.
To me, it's amazing that you're able to get one of these things done, but what you're doing right now is working. At this point in my show, I have something called inappropriate questions. And since we are both podcasters, I figured the best way to do this was to bring in another podcaster. Have you ever heard of the Wintry Mix podcast?
I have.
Okay, so Alex Kaufman is in the ski world of podcasts. He's a pioneer, and he's got an amazing, amazing voice, too. He should do one of those serial type podcasts because his voice is perfect for those. But Alex put together 3 inappropriate questions for you, and Alex has a new podcast coming out with ski area management as well, and I'm sure he's going to talk about it, too. And I am going to let Alex intro himself, and then we will go to inappropriate questions. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Holy shit, 3 podcasters on one podcast. That's a little bit too much, so I'll try to be quick. Inappropriate questions. What's up, pal? This is AK, the Wintry Mix podcast guy, aka the Pod Sam podcast guy. Oh man, too many hobbies. What's up, Scott? Congratulations on your podcast. Seems to be kicking some tail. I'll definitely be checking it out right after I download and enjoy the Mike Wilson one that I see Powell just threw up. All right, first question. Scott, what is your trick to paying the least possible taxes? We just had tax day. Maybe you know something we don't know. What's your go-to move to reduce your taxable income?
Find the right people. I'm not a numbers guy. I can be a numbers guy, but that's not my expertise. So finding the right people.
That's a metaphor for your whole life.
100%. Knowing the right people, finding the right people, it definitely, like, that's number one. Because you can't know everything about everything, but you can know a lot about certain subjects, and you can specialize. If anyone wants the best tax guys that I know, they can definitely get at me on Instagram, Facebook, email, whatever, and I'll hook them up with some good tax guys.
All right, there you go. You can find him and get tax information. We are now going to jump into question number 2.
Well, you've been in and around the ski towns for quite a while, Scott. Let's hear your best interlude with tourist girls story. I'm sure Powell hasn't gotten them all out of you yet.
So you live in tourist towns, and people come in for a week and out for a week, and you're working, I think, at Christie's Sports, maybe for a little bit, but you're working in and out of different ski stuff in these areas. You're a ski racer, and I'm sure you can put on that act that makes them fall in love with the ski guy for the week. Has that happened?
Yeah, so I used to be a sushi chef at the sushi bar in town. And when you roll sushi in front of women at the bar, they definitely like that. And there have been a couple crazy, funny experiences from all of that. I don't think any of which I've actually followed through with, but the one specifically that comes to mind was there were 2 women that came to the bar, and they were from out of town. They were fun. They were getting a little drunk, and at the end of the night, I gave them their bill, and they sign it and head out. And on the back of the check, it says, "Come have fun with the 2 of us," and has both of their numbers on it. And I'm like, I don't know if I regret the decision of not doing that now, but yeah, that's probably like, I know it's not that entertaining, but that's probably as far as that's gone. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of promiscuous. I don't know.
Well, either am I, but I am sick to my stomach that you didn't call those women back. You probably ruined their vacation.
Probably.
Okay. We will go to our final inappropriate question.
And since my niche is a little bit more towards the ski area operations side of things, and I think you're from Crusty Butt, so let's put you in charge of Crested Butte for this question. What are you changing first, and what are you never changing?
Oh, man. I ski for them. This is a hard question for me. So, overall, just a little bit more organization and transparency. Knowing a little bit more about what's going on from my perspective as an athlete, and a little bit more organization would be sweet. And overall, I think they support the town really well. That's a really good question. I mean, so I am a proponent for growth, but I would want to see like very calculated growth and well thought out planned growth. And so, like, man, if I could do anything, I would connect Crested Butte and Aspen with chairlifts, but they would all be sustainably run. There wouldn't be any sort of excess greenhouse gases. It would be the most sustainable way that you could do it. Obviously, that money doesn't exist, but if I could, I would connect those two. And I know a lot of people would hate me for that, but it's changing. The ski culture in today's age is changing, and we need to adapt with it. And we need to figure out ways to create collaboration versus competition. You and I could have gone into competition. We could have gotten angsty towards each other, and this would have never happened. I am all about collaboration, and that's where it's really tough to see Vail doing what it's doing and then having to create another team of ski resorts that's doing something different. I just want to see collaboration. I want to see skiing become more of a staple in all of the U.S. Prices need to come down. It needs to be more accessible for everyone. And overall, I think that by creating this elitist mentality around the sport of skiing, we are ultimately shooting ourselves in the foot and will kill our industry quicker than we'll ever know by having $170 tickets and, $500 rental packages and all this crazy stuff. I think that if there's anything that I would change about the ski industry in general, it would be lower prices, create bigger infrastructure, make it so like people don't have to sit in traffic in California, like connect some of the ski areas and same with Utah. And yeah, overall, just like let's all band together and take responsibility and be leaders of the industry. Because the thing is, the ski industry needs outdoor enthusiasts who are inspired by nature, by the views, by the experience of the thrills of skiing and the wind in your face. And we just keep making it more and more exclusive.
If you don't have a season pass and you walk up to the ticket booth and they're going to say $150, it's going to be a lot of people's first and last day skiing because they're going to realize they have to learn how to do it. They got to rent the gear. And it's just such an expensive thing for most people. And the days of the mom and pop resort where it's really cheap and something that you can do every day, they're almost gone. And that's the scary thing about skiing is while all the things you say, what we need to happen with prices lowering, sure, that would make it great. But until we start seeing CEOs hugging, I don't think we're going to see prices lowering.
Right? Totally. Yeah. And I mean, it's hard because it's a capitalistic system. Being an entrepreneur, you have to play by the rules of the game. And I would just love to see more collaboration from Crested Butte all around.
But you think it's the best mountain in the entire world as well?
I absolutely love Crested Butte. It's amazing. They could do a little bit better at making their park, but it's Crested Butte. I'm not here for the park. Any ski resort in the world I'm happy to be at, but there's a reason why I call it home.
All right. Well, those are inappropriate questions, and I want to thank you for your time. You can listen to The Athletic Stance after you hear the Powell Movement over on iTunes.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's been a pleasure to be here.
So that was time with Scot Chrisman, and he's got some pretty big dreams, and his Athletic Stance podcast is definitely worth checking out, but only after you review the Powell Movement on iTunes. Next week, I'll kick off summer episodes with a chat with legendary surfer Taylor Knox. He's an awesome guy. The conversation spans decades, and it's pretty amazing, so I hope you tune in for that. Until then, please review me on whatever platform you listen to me on, tell your friends about the show, and finally, I need to thank the best sponsors a guy could ever have. They're Evo, Rescue Water, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. They make the show happen, so thanks to them, and have a great week, everyone.